right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. We're about one past the hour. Thanks again for joining, everyone. My name is Mike Belkowitz, customer success engineer with TIPCO Jaspersoft. And this is Dr. Jasper. Our session today is going to be actually presented by Giulio Toffoli. He's our head of the Jaspersoft studio team, and he's going to present on the new Jaspersoft 7.5, present some tips, tricks, advice, show you guys a little bit about what's actually been released in our most recent version. I think without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Giulio. Giulio, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name is Giulio Toffoli. I'm the project leader for Jaspersoft Studio. And today I'm going to talk to you about the new features introduced in Jaspersoft 7.5. Okay, so what we will see, it's what's new. We will see some of this feature in action in Jasper Report Server. And we will also see some new functionality of Jasper Reports library and how to use these new functionalities inside Studio. And of course, with Mike, we will.
Sorry, I totally forgot to mention, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom meeting and put your questions in there. We're going to save all the questions for the end of Giulio's session, and then we'll go through the questions at that point. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get started. What's new in Jaspersoft 7.5? So the main new feature is the introduction of 3 new type of charts, which are all gauge related: the gauge, semi-gauge, and multi-level gauge. Then we introduce it, and we will see a demo of these charts and how they looks like, how to configure them, also in Studio. An important feature with a lot of requests, was the ability to hide duplicate table rows in a doc. We will see also this feature in action, and we will talk about a couple of notes about these functions, this feature. We will slightly touch the functionalities introduced for the integrity of referential domains, which means what happened when some fields in a domain are no longer there or have been changed and they are used in a view or inside a report. And then the specific things change inside Jasper Reports library, which is the introduction of a special no data cell to be used in table components. Another improvements to the table component, which is the print when expression for hide entire rows. The ability to scale fonts when showing text in order to let a text fit a specific area, and the ability to embed fonts when exporting a report in PowerPoint and in Word. We are not going to demo this latest feature, but it was important to mention. Okay, so gauge in Jasper Report Server. So gauge looks like this kind of clocks. They are very, very useful and mostly used in dashboards to present key information, so key indicator, and they can show one or more values. So let's see them in action inside Jasper Report Server. Again, we'll see gauge, arc gauge, and multi-level gauge. Okay, so let's take Jasper Report Server. Let's see if I have an instance open here. Let's see if my credentials are still valid. So, okay, perfect. So I will put this in full screen. And we will start by creating a new ad hoc view. So in the meantime, you can see the renewed home page of Jasper Report Server with some new icons, some new fonts, and refresh home page. So to create some gouge, we are going to use footmark data for cross-tab data source. Now, please note that I'm using this one because this is what you can see in any trial version of Jasper Reaper Server. So if you want to download the trial version, play in the same way or replicate what I'm doing right now, you can do that with the default dataset that you can find as examples. Okay, so here we are in the ad hoc view. I'm going to select a new type of visualization. Now, here is another new things introduced in 7.5. There is no longer the selector to say, hey, I want to work with a crosstab or table or a chart. No, crosstab and tables are just new visualizations as long as all the others. So again, in our case, we want to work with gouge, so we will select gouge here. Now, as usual, when I select a visualization, Jasper Reaper Server asks me or suggests me how or what should I have in order to display meaningful data. And he's very clear here. I need to put at least one measure inside my column. So this is what we are going to do. So we are going to drag my store sales inside the column. And here I have my gouge. By default, it shows the entire value and it tells me the name of the measures. Now, if I want to go deeper and have the same value of store sales but split by store country, I just drag my store country here, and with the data level selector, I can actually see the value split by the several countries. And the same if I add another level of detail, again, I can see this value in more details. So by default, the 100%, which means the color for the full circle here, is set to an arbitrary value of 100. But by using the chart format, I can actually change in the appearance tab. I can change this value. Now, if we take a look to the values here, we know that the biggest is this one, 267,000. So let's assume or pretend that we want our maximum value in terms of target value, I will call to be 250,000. And based on this value, all the arc will adjust. So I have my full target reached in the store, but in the others, like this one, I may not doing very well. Let's move to another type of gouge, which is for instance, the arc gouge. So I click the arc. The requirements in terms of data are the same. So I can see all my my values here, my gouges here. What about the colors? Well, also the colors can be configured with the appearance tab in the chart formatting settings. And here I can define stops. Each stops is a color which represent a value at a specific percentage of the entire semi-arc in this case, or the whole circle in the case of circular gouge. So in this case, I can have, I don't know, red. If I'm under 0.2, I can have then orange and maybe a yellow. And if I reach the full potentials of my target, let's say, I set this to green. Note that these are stops, are not really color. That means that the color actually may adapt to the range it's representing. If in example, a value stays between two stops, well, the color will be slightly different. It can be seen by this orange, which is different by this orange. See, so the value actually, the color used represents as much as possible the value that is displayed. But again, having defining stops helps me to at least create some specific colors at specific percentage points. Okay, let's work with the multi-level gauge. Now, the multi-level gauge has a slightly different requirements. It requires more measures, at least 2. So I will add the store cost here, and we see that we have now two measures: the store sales and the store cost. Now, in the multi-gauge, the color does not have effect. So in spite of the fact that I defined my color stop, these are not took in consideration. Still is took in consideration the max value, but not the color. Why? Because in that case, it's much more useful to specify a color for the series. So I can immediately identify which is one series and the other series. So by default, Jaspersoft server will use this dark blue and light blue. If I add another measure, it will add another ring with its predefined color. I can add as many measures I want, not just 2 or 3. And here I can actually select the color for my series. So the first series, it could be, I don't know, like this purple. And then I want a series to be pink, and then a series, let's say, to be yellow, or something like yellow, green, something like that. Okay, apply, and see that now I have a way to set the color for my series. Okay, so that's the part in Jaspersoft server. So let's see now how we can work with the same type of chart inside Jaspersoft Studio. Now, I don't want to create everything from scratch. We don't have enough time for that. But I prepared a report, and I will go through the main points to configure the 3 types of chart. So the gauge charts are part of the HTML5 charts family. So when I drag a chart of this type inside my report, I see the gauge at the bottom here. So I'm canceling now, and we will work with what we already have. So this example is a simple report. We can check the query of the report is selecting a set of ship country. Actually, it is selecting all the orders, and it's ordering that orders by ship region. So this is essentially a fairly big number of records. So we can preview them a little bit to have an idea of what data we are going to get. So let's see, first 100 records and preview data. So here we have plenty of records, but in the gauge chart, we usually show one single value, right? So we will have to reconduct all my record to a single value, and this is where I need to configure my chart. So in edit chart properties, in the data configuration, I will say that I would use as category level, in this case, my region. After all, we order the records by region, just for that. And we will use a special calculation, just a count, to specify the number of regions that have the same name. Okay, so if I run this report, it will start by asking me, well, nothing. This is not the case. It's another report in which I will show the use of parameters. This is, I'm just counted the number of regions, different regions that appears in my orders. So in all my orders, I have 122 regions, and this is my chart. Now, let's see how I can color this. Still double click, chart formatting. And here for the gauge, we have a special, a new item here, gauge. And here we can specify the minimum and maximum value. This can also be specified by means of expressions. And we can also specify the color stops. The stops are the same as the ones we have seen in Jaspersoft server. The way they work is the same, but I can define as many stops I want, or just one or two or three and so on. Okay. Of course, also this can be configured dynamically. So if I go to the advanced properties, let's show only what I've changed for this example. So we will see specific properties for the gauge. I see that I specified some static value, but for the colors here, I'm using Java expressions that helps me dynamically define this range. So if you need to pass the range in a dynamic way for the colors, you can do that as well with Jaspersoft server. The configuration of the arc is very similar. Again, the data is just collect by region, and for each region count one. Remember, this was what it was doing, count one for each region. And for the multi-level gauge, as we have seen in Jaspersoft server, we need to provide more than a single measure. And in that case, we are showing these three values: the lowest, the average, and the highest freight that we find inside the orders. So again, if I preview this and I see my gauge, I will see these three levels. Labels and other things can be seen when I run this report in HTML. So the chart becomes interactive, and I can play with them. Of course, there will be all the formattings for format the strings and the colors of the string and so on, as usual for all the charts. All right, let's move on, and let's talk about the hide duplicate rows. So these features allow us to hide duplicate rows, as it says. So let's see how it works in a doc view. So I'm going to create a new doc view. In that case, I will use demo for a doc, which is simpler example domain. And here, let's start by selecting, for instance, country and city. Now, the duplicated rows make sense when I use a table as visualization. So let's again select country and city. Perfect. Okay, now we see that there are duplicates. To even better see these duplicates, I will use the full data, and I will also enforce sorting here. Okay, so we can see now even better that we have plenty of these duplicates. Now, if I click hide duplicate rows, I see that the duplicates are removed. Now, what happens if I show all the duplicated? Here I see that these are sorted because I have sorted them. But let's remove the sorting. If I remove the sorting, I see an the sort that comes from my database. I mean, something that is essentially no sorting. After all, I did not set anything, so this is what I expect. But if I ask to hide duplicated rows, actually what happened behind the scene is that if there is no sorting set, uh, Jasper Reaper server will sort anyway for me all the records. So this is a strategy that is used to more efficiently identify and remove duplicated rows. Now, of course, if I want to enforce a sorting by city, this is still possible. So I will sort by city, and now everything is filtered in terms of duplicates, but sorted by city. Okay, let's do something more, and let's talk about what happened when I use groups. So let's group by, for instance, customer ID. And in that case, I may also want to show some totals, details and totals, and I may want to sort this probably by customer ID as well. All right, or even well, I can, but that's okay. Let's keep this one. So I want to show duplicate rows first, and I see that for each customer, I actually have several records. Now, let's go back to the hide duplicate rows. And the important things that I want you to notice is that in spite of the fact that I filtered the rows, the total is, which in this case is the number of records, it still applies to my duplicated rows. So that means that even if I'm hiding the duplicated rows, calculations are still performed to the whole set. And in that case, actually, for this customer, I have actually 6 orders. Okay. All right. This was important to notice. Now let's go back to our slides. And let's see the next topic, which is a little bit more technical, let's say. In Jasper Reaper Server 7.1, we introduced features that were allowing to check for invalid fields referenced by a report or a view in order to avoid to execute a report or a view for which all the fields were no longer available. This was used to prevent problems tied to the fact that the integrity of my domains were not preserved in respect to the reports. To simplify this, this was the scenario. I create a domain with some tables and some fields. I create a report which use data from this domain. And then at some point, I remove some fields from the domains or some tables. What happened to the reports? Well, it eventually may fail. The problem is that this is not always true, especially if I've removed a field that is no longer used or is not used at all by my reports or by my view. So we need to provide some kind of more relaxed way to check for integrity and consistency. For this reason, in 7.5, we introduced 2 options: the skip check sources for reports and the skip checks sources for views. By default, they are set to false. And there is a third one, which is source in strict mode, which defaults to true, which says behaves like in 7.1. So if a customer wants to activate this more relaxed check, he can set this to false in order to avoid to impose the specific check for integrity, or keep this to true, but disable it for specific object like reports or views. So whereas there's 3 properties defined, these are defined inside a configuration file in the web inf of Jasper Reaper Server. In particular, the file is application context adoc data strategy. And this is how the files looks like. And here is where I can set my true and false value. I think by default, you don't see this property, skip check sources for views, but you can add it and set the value for it if you want to set a value for it, which is not the default. All right, this was about domain referential integrity. Let's move to Jasper Reports Library and Jaspersoft Studio. And in particular, we are going to work with the table component. So let's move to Studio. Let's close this report. And we will not start from scratch again. We don't have enough time, but I have this report and I can run it just to give you a sense of what it prints. So I can specify our city. Let's see if I don't specify any city, if it does anything or not. Okay, so it's going to show a set of cities split with several groups by using a table, 37 pages, and that's what we have. Now, sometimes when there is no data for a table, we would like to replace the table with something else. Up to now, we could have just like a blank object, or we could have something like the table with just the titles and no data. So now we have a new option when we select our table, which is called when no data type. There is this new option, which is called no data cell. So if I click this no data cell and I go into my table, I can enable a new special section of my table called no data. So I will create this no data cell. And here, just for the sake of, just for an example, I'm going to put this like a text field, a static text with something like, hey, no data here. All right, maybe we can make this a little bit bigger, and we transparent background. Transparency is something that has been added in recent versions of Jasper reports. All right, so let's save this report. Let's go to preview. And let's pretend to have a city called Magic Kingdom and run this report. There is actually no such of city, so the table will be empty, and instead of an empty table, I can see now my new cell here. All right, next feature is still about the tables, and it's a way to conditionally hide a section of my table. So let's go back to Studio, and I see that my table is actually made of several sections. Sections that in some way resemble a little bit the section of my main report, the page, the header, then I may have some groups header, the text, and so on. So what have been introduced, I will pick the details section here now. It's this print when expression. Again, this print when expression is available for each section, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use this in details. So print when expression says, if a specific condition is met, don't show this entire section of the table. And for this example, we will use something like, let's see, freight. I should have this. I actually wrote here just to be faster. So freight is one of the field of the data set I have in my table. And if the value of freight is less than 10, this expression will evaluate to true, and my section details will be displayed. Otherwise, it will be hidden. Okay, let's save this and preview. Okay, let's save this and preview. Now I will be asked for to filter. So let's remove this filter. Run this. Okay, now you can see that the freights are all less than 10. In order to do the counter test, I could modify my expression here, and I would say less than 100, and let's see how it works. So I will run this again. Okay, and now I can see that there are actually values that are more than 10. Now, this print when expression, in this case, probably this example I gave you was not the perfect one, because I'm essentially filtering data. And probably the best way of filtering data is not by using this print when expression. Instead, I should have used the filter expression at dataset level. So what is this print when expression useful for? It's useful to, for instance, when I have several details and based on some parameter, based on the customer, based on some other information, I may want to show a detail instead of another, or in some cases, I don't want to show sensible data, so I want to hide this, but keep the data for, I don't know, total calculation, stuff like this. In general, this print when expression, like all the print when expression inside my report, are always used to drive a specific behavior of my layout, not to filter data, instead to simply modify the layout of my report. All right, so let's go back to my slides. Well, see, here they are. And let's present the final demo of this session. And it's about this new feature called scale font. And this is very important because it also impacts something that probably anyone using Jaspersoft Studio used before, which is the ability to have a field and let the field grow if it's too small for the text that is going to be contained. Now, this usually was set by clicking a checkbox called stretch with overflow. Now, this stretch with overflow is no longer present, and it has been replaced by this text adjust, which is no longer just a checkbox, but is a combo box with 3 options. And the 3 options are what was before the default, which is cut text, the stretch height, which is exactly what we had before with the checkbox, stretch with overflow, stretch height, and the new one, which is scale font. So let's see that in action. As you can see here, I have 3 text fields. They are identical. They contain the same expression, which is a fairly long text. And let's see how the 3 options for the text adjust works. So I'm going to preview this, and here is the result. So if I don't specify anything, which is the default, the text is essentially cut. If I use stretch height, the text field grows as much as required to contain the whole text. And again, this is what many times is done with Jasper reports. Text field for which we don't know how much text will contain. We'll set them to stretch with overflow. Now we will set this new property to stretch height. Finally, the scale font, and this is the real new thing. Jasper reports will try to scale down the font until the entire text actually fit inside the space that we have allocated for this text. This is done with some kind of trial and error test. So Jasper Reports tried several fonts in a very smart way to find the ones that fit. But of course, this process may not go to an end. So there are also properties to drive how this process of scale font calculation is performed. But personally, I will not touch this property. They are already set with a very good trade-off between speed and good results. And this is, in this case, I'm showing this with a long text, but most of the time that's probably even more useful with a title that needs to stay in that particular space, and I don't want it to be cut. Instead, I want it to fit the space, and this is the case for the scale font new option. All right. Well, we got to the end of this presentation, so ready to answer questions.
Yeah, if there's any questions, please, again, feel free to ask them in the Q&A thing. Can you go to the next slide there, Giulio, too, just before people start dropping off? I just want to let people know that our next Dr. Jasper session will be March 12th. So again, we're every second Thursday of the month. So look for info about that. We'll be sending out invites, hopefully a week or so before with info on the topic and stuff. So I don't actually have any questions right now. I don't see any on the list right now, so I know we're a little bit over. So I appreciate everyone sticking out with us and seeing the changes that have come. There's a lot of changes too that Giulio couldn't cover in this short time, but feel free to reach out to your your contacts here at Jaspersoft or your account execs if you have any questions, and we can definitely get you more information. Thanks again, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Giulio, for presenting.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, everybody. See you the next time.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.